In mid-June, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan hosted two regional summits that brought together many countries at odds with the West. During normal times, the meetings themselves would have passed mostly unnoticed. But Iran's President Hassan Rouhani made sure to use the platform to warn of what he called America's aggressive behavior. The meetings came as tensions were sharply rising between Tehran and Washington. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan also attended one of the meetings where his photo ops with the presidents of Russia and China were surely timed to send a message. James Kim has the details.
Tensions in one of the world's busiest and most strategic waterways rise to heights not seen in years, as Iran's President Hassan Rouhani addresses leaders from China, Russia, and across the Eurasian landmass.
The US government, over the last 2 years, violating all the international structures and rules and using its economic, financial and military resources, has taken an aggressive approach and presents a serious risk to stability in the region and the world.
Attending the annual leaders' meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in the Kyrgyz capital Bishkek, Rouhani directly called out the US as Washington's two biggest rivals looked on. Founded in 2001 by China, Russia, and 4 former Soviet republics, the SCO expanded to 8 members in 2017 after accepting India and Pakistan. It also comprises several dialogue and observer members. Making up nearly half the world's population and around a fifth of the world's land and GDP, many have called it a potential counterweight to NATO. But for now, those figures are just numbers, as the SCO lacks the security guarantees of its Western rival. Turkey, however, lies in a unique position, being both a member of NATO and a dialogue partner of the SCO. The summit was followed by a meeting of the regional group SCO, which includes many of the same countries in the SCO. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who was in the Tajik capital Dushanbe for the meeting, was eager to show he had other partners to engage. The meeting came at a crucial time for Turkey, as its relations with the US hover near an all-time low. The most recent spat was sparked over the pending delivery of Russia's S-400 missile system to Turkey, which Washington calls a direct threat to the NATO alliance. And with Turkey's decades-long aspirations to join the EU having slowed to a standstill, the country's leaders have for several years flirted with the idea of joining groups like the SCO. Some voices in Turkey have echoed that call for a total revamping of the country's alliances towards the East.
Turkey has very specific conflicts around itself. We have a huge security problem with the Americans, who occupy the north of Syria. We have a huge conflict in the Eastern Mediterranean, again with the Americans and the alliance that they constructed with Israel, the Greek part of Cyprus, and Greece. So these are security threats that also push Turkey towards a deeper integration with Asian countries and, of course, with the SCO.
But could the SCO, a relatively new and still obscure global grouping with no clear mandate, really feel the economic and security ties that Turkey has relied on for more than 5 decades?
I think it's not realistic to expect that SCO will be an alternative to NATO. It is true that occasionally Turkish leaders, and particularly President Tayyip Erdogan, have referred to SCO, but this was, I believe, mostly as a rhetorical question, and in order to basically message Turkey's partners in the West that Turkey is unhappy with some of the positions taken by those partners.
For now, Ankara seems to be taking a wait-and-see approach, but the message is clear. Turkey has options. James Kim, Straight Talk.
And to break this all down, joining me now is Professor Erhan, who is the president of Altinbas University, based here in Istanbul, and Andrey Chuprygin, who is a senior lecturer at the National Research University Higher School of Economics in Moscow. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk, and thank you for joining me. Andrey, I would like to start with you. Unlike NATO, the SCO isn't a Formula Alliance that has security guarantees for its members. And I think its founders never intended it to be a counterweight to NATO, maybe in the short term. So is there a possibility later down the line that the SCO could evolve into something like NATO?
I don't think so.
Why?
The main reason is that NATO's remit ends in the collective security as they announce it, while SCO is mainly directed, economically oriented alliance, which has spread its mandate also into security issues, basically related to the counter-terrorism operations and not the collective defense of the borders, which NATO actually propagates. So I don't think that...
So it shouldn't be perceived as a threat by NATO members?
Well, that depends on NATO members, actually, because the threat to NATO is, to my mind, is mainly artificial and has to do with the number of positions in NATO itself and the budget that NATO realizes in its wake. So I don't think that SCO will ever be any threat to anybody in the long term, unless somebody threatens the integrity of SCO, which is not very mature, but it is developing.
So, Cagri, one criticism of the SCO is that it has members hostile to one another within the organization. We see China and India and Pakistan and India, of course, fought 3 times before independence. So what do you think maybe the SCO sees itself as a potential mediator when we look at the member countries?
When we look at the member countries of NATO, they also have some rivalries and competitions within each other. So it is not a matter. The main motive behind an organization which makes it a real global security organization or defense organization, whether the members have a common security agenda. If you look at the members, if you compare the agenda items of China to Russia's, India to Pakistanis, there is no such a common security agenda. On one hand, we see China and Russia shake hands on some issues, but in backdoors, we also see China also have very good relations with United States over the Korean Peninsula issue. So,
is this called diplomacy or
this
something
is diplomacy.
Andrey, given the current tensions, if Iran was a formal member of the SCO, how would that change US's calculus while it's tackling with Iran and tensions are escalating lately?
So actually, I don't see any change possible in the United States position towards Iran, because the United States position towards Iran has nothing to do with security and has nothing to do with the international politics. It has everything to do with the economics and trade priorities that the United States during this current administration implements. So as I previously said in another program, that this is the Boeing sanctions. They are not political sanctions. They are not nuclear sanctions. They are Boeing sanctions, because if you want to buy Boeing, it's okay. Then let's talk. If you're going to buy Airbus, no, that's a no-go.
You just mentioned China's role and maybe the conflict in interest with Russia. Everyone in the SCO, except India, is part of the Belt and Road Initiative. So could you explain China's strategy of using these multilateral groups for its own interests?
If you look at the indicators, economic indicators, forecasts for the future 20 years, almost all of the economic experts agree that China will be #1 economy in the world. So they are aware that they need more trade partners, they need more markets, and they need more reach for the resources. That's why they developed a quite multifaceted and multinational strategy of trade expansion. But on the other hand, according to the same economic experts, China's main rivals are two: first, the United States and India. So India, of course, tries to make some troubles with the future expectations of China in order to open enough space for its market initiatives. That's why when we look behind the scenes, the main competition between China and India are almost on those same issues. With a small difference, India did not start a global expansion yet. But we see Chinese in Africa, in Latin America, almost everywhere. So in future, we will see the area of competition will also enlarge to the global scale between China and India.
All right. I guess we have to leave it here. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk. That's appreciated a lot.